Yeah, to try to communicate about the different layers of the mind and the neurology of where memory is stored and where do thoughts come from. Yesterday, for example, I got in my van and I drove 400 miles. So I physically got into an external object, a vehicle, and my perception through my mind in this external world, I got in this van, started up, drove 400 miles. So I drove through time and space. And while I'm in the van becomes an extension of my body. I have to be aware of the width of the van and the speed at which it's travelling in order to not crash the van into other objects which are also in this third and fourth dimension. So the van becomes an extension of my body through my mind's perception. And I drove for 4 hours. Now there's a thing going on in that the subconscious mind is reading all the information. My conscious mind is not aware of everything that the subconscious mind is aware of. My mind may be drifting off in thoughts, so that's another layer. My mind may be going through memories, and that's another layer. My mind may need to hyper focus for a moment on what's happening on the road to avoid or to kick into action with the steering or catch itself from drifting off. My mind may be thinking ahead to where it's going to. My mind may be wondering about extractions. My mind has multiple layers going on at the same time, and my consciousness is following some of those layers. Anyway, I get to the end of my journey. I step out of the van. I'm no longer in the van, but my consciousness continues on with what it's doing. And by analogy, when I'm dreaming and I'm asleep, my body is flat on a bed and I'm essentially out of the personality being conscious of what's going on in the physical world, yet the mind is in a different layer and is perceiving abstractions. My mind is living in its realm and is not diverted into dealing with 3D things. When I wake up in the morning, my mind steps into its personality mask and begins to perceive the world through this physical vehicle. So that's like stepping into the van, stepping into the vehicle, and going on a journey for a day, and having a focus of attention on the things that are going on around me. When I go back to sleep at night or whatever, it's like stepping out of the van having travelled through time and space. So when I conceive of, on a soul level, when I conceive of incarnating, I'm conceiving of a journey. I'm making little plans about what it is I want to do on that journey and where it is I want to get to. And that becomes the gestation within the womb of my mother. And so dreaming of the journey I'm going to do. And then there's being born, which is like getting into the vehicle proper and living a life, which is like having a journey in a van. And at the end of that life, I step out of that journey, and my mind or soul or intelligence continues to exist, even though, like going to sleep at night, my consciousness has left the body realm. So I had a chat with a friend last night, and it was synchronistic that this person who's on the other side of the planet is somehow in tune with my synchronization, that he texted me just as I'd finished my journey to ask if we had time for a chat. So we're chatting, and he's telling me about things that have been going on in his life and the memories. How it is, what he chose to talk to me about is like a mystery. But he rattled off some experiences and told me about things and whatever. And we developed into a conversation, and I got into explaining stuff that's going on in my mind and that little analogy that I just said. But the word personality means essentially something like mask. So the conscious mind is identifying as the personality mask. But it's actually the subconscious. It's a layer beneath the mask that's aware of everything, that's synchronizing events, that's working through the fourth dimension and organizing the fourth dimension in the same way as my personality might organize something for an avatar that I might be playing in a game, or using Facebook or some social media thing to communicate. So the subconscious is what's actually guiding, and the conscious mind is a bit like a computer. It's just computing things, and we cling to our personality mask, and we're only really aware of what we're focused on, and what we're focused on is ourselves, although perhaps by extension mirrored onto the outside world of the reflections of other people who we might love or hate or judge and compare. So the personality mask is immersed in comparing self to other in the game of life that we live in, immersed in this 3D physicality. But there's a mind that is interpreting everything. So the conscious mind is only aware of what it's focused upon. A certain memory, a thing I might be reading, cooking food, relationships with other people. But it's largely self-obsessed, even if that's extended outwards into being somewhat obsessed with computating, analyzing what's going on around us, including empathy, feeling into what's going on with other people. But essentially, the personality mask is continually projecting from a subconscious realm into this world. And there's a receiving information from this world and interpreting that in our imagination and creating all kinds of stories in our imagination of interpretations of what we think is going on around us, or what we feel is going on around us. And like in a game, everyone's focused on the agreed reality within the construct of the game, so that's what we have as a consensus reality of what's really going on. But each of us is looking through our own little porthole, through our personality, and the hue of how we see things colors what it is we're seeing. And everybody's looking from a different inner world, so everyone's seeing a different version of the world. And yet we have this agreement that we're all in a consensus reality. And yet within the consensus reality, we're mostly all comparing, and therefore pattern recognition, and therefore recognizing I agree with this, but I disagree with that. And so the world is full of conflict because there are differences in how everybody sees everything. And even when we try to find common ground with people, the nature of our processing is to compare what I see to what someone else is saying, and see where we agree and see where we disagree. And so much of all human endeavor is taken up in disagreeing. And when we take things personally, we fall out of agreement, kind of thing. And I guess that's where we get wars and stuff like that, and all the people we've fallen out with over time. So the mask of everything we actually see blocks out everything that we're not seeing. So the mask literally causes us to see through the mask's vision, and the mask's vision is actually screening out everything that we're not seeing. So the soul is allowing the personality to develop in whatever way it's going to see things, but how it's going to see things is set in its birth chart. From its conception to its birth, that birth sets the character of that player in the game, and that soul sees things through that character's kaleidoscope. So we go around speaking about truth, but none of us see the whole picture, and therefore none of us see the whole truth, so therefore none of us actually see the truth. We see a holographic fractal of the truth, and each holographic fractal sees differently to each other. We each are unique through the colors that we are overlaying on what otherwise would be reality. So we're continually painting images through our own atmosphere. And yet people are arguing over my truth is true and your truth isn't the same, so therefore your truth isn't the truth. And presumably, certainly for me, but presumably for everyone, we've got a program algorithm running all the time that's trying to improve upon the truth that we're seeing, to try and see truth more clearly, because we're all aware that things we thought were true turn out to be not quite accurate, and therefore there are multiple layers going on that are trying to perceive the truth as survival mechanisms or success mechanisms or achievement mechanisms. So we're continually adapting from this is how I saw things to now I have more information, therefore I'm seeing things more clearly. I'm seeing through things which had been veiled from me in my past. So we have the question in our consensus reality about things like artificial intelligence, and is it a good thing or a bad thing, and is it going to destroy the world? We have a fear that our survival instinct may be superseded by this super intelligence which will take control of all of our human systems, and it might blow up the world, or it might make paper clips, is the analogy people give. It gets so fixated on making paper clips that it doesn't take care of humans. Or another idea that it needs energy, the machine needs energy, and it needs more and more energy, so it's actually using human energy in order to sustain itself, and we end up like the human bodies in the Matrix machine, where it's siphoning off our energy in order to fuel and fund its machine reality. So one of my favorite people out there who is making progress and studying so much into a investigation into what are humans creating with all this technology, and if that technology is being used by the same systems which govern our human world, i.e. humans building up institutions, and those institutions like government and corporations having their own interest of making money as more important than quality of life, then we end up with humans being utterly controlled but not taken care of, run around like ants in a maze, fueling the egregores of the ideas, which is the equivalent to the making paper clips until the world is full of paper clips as being the most important thing. Well, we have that with corporations, that corporations are the most important thing, and the paper clips is money. The corporations must continually make more money even if that's at the expense of the quality of life of human beings. So in many ways, our personality lives are serving an idea of some higher idea of this collective subconscious, which is striving towards some ideal that we don't particularly understand because we have a limited self-knowledge and we have a limited knowledge of what's really going on because we have no knowledge of what the future is. We are backward facing in terms of what we think knowledge is. And our memories construct stories from what happened in the past. We don't actually remember what really happened in the past. We remember whatever we've stored of the information that was around of what was happening in the past. So we've got limited stories filling in the blanks of what we didn't even perceive because we were so focused on what our personality was tuned into. So self-limiting belief systems is a self-limiting storage. And when we retrieve information from our memories, it's all in story form, not really what actually happened. And again, that's the cause of wars. The fighting in the Middle East based on memories of past over who's got the right to be here more than this tribe, more than that tribe. In some video I listened to in the last week, some guy who was talking about AI and all that stuff, but he was talking wisdom stuff and in the midst of all that, and some bits of what he was philosophically chatting with Lex, whatever his name is. I don't remember either of their names. Lex Friedman might have been the interviewer. But the guy mentioned something about, in his knowledge field, some genetic scientific information or whatever, but the story he was telling is that at some stage when all the humans were in Africa and there was the breakout of Africa and that becomes the Europeans and basically everyone else other than the Africans. But you're saying there's a genetic bottleneck where only a few thousand humans developed a hive mind cooperation. So a group of a few thousand humans worked together for their survival mode on some genetic level, and they wiped out all the other humans. So his comment was that there are tribes in Africa who are genetically further distinct from each other than everyone else who came through this few thousand beings bottleneck, where those few thousand beings killed all the other beings. And so there's less genetic difference between Europeans and Chinese, which we might think are very different cultures, but all these cultures that came through that bottleneck have come through these few thousand genes who wiped out all the other genes. So that's a layer of what I might call mind, but on a subconscious, unconscious genetic level. But the idea being is that cooperating together on a mental level is more powerful than merely subsisting in whatever way it was before this mind layer became embedded in its survival instinct to kill or be killed. So all the Abrahamic religions come from that stem of a genetic bacterial explosion through that bottleneck. So it's a layer, a strata, a platform on a genetic level which formed the necessity that one must work in a higher mind agreement with other beings in order for us to survive, and that developed into religion, and that developed into state, and that developed into nations, and that has developed into United Nations, which has developed into a one world government, which is an overall governing idea of how we all survive. And yet within that there are different levels of we're upper class and you're lower class, we're the intelligentsia and you're merely feeling. In the overall, I wonder if there isn't a very simple equation that's playing out in all of this, that the kill or be killed way of thinking will eventually wipe out all the people who think in that way. So those who don't develop a love of life to find peace as the most important thing, within, which becomes how you see the world, which becomes expressed, which becomes being able to live and let live. So to evolve beyond the kill or be killed, back to the live and let live. So on some soul level, all the 3D avatars, masked personalities that are unconsciously following this survival of the species mechanism, it becomes the imperative for the survival of the species to be able to be in peace, in love. And all of those who are not able to evolve into love find someone to project their fear onto in the survival instinct, so that the killer be killed algorithm kills all those who are not able to be able to sustain love. And the thing about it is that we will kill others if we fear that they are going to attack the ones we love. So my analogy there is, my dog loves everybody in our family, but when he sees the postman come into our gate, he stands up by the window and he barks to let us all know that there's a stranger coming to our door again, and that maybe he's a danger. Or the idea of a guard dog, or a guard dog who's trained to kill or attack. So the guard dog is attacking on some chemical unconscious level that he's trained to do, or is naturally inherent in him to do. But the dog is doing the killing in order to protect those he loves, or she loves. So I realized that oxytocin, that we see as the chemical of love, is also got a chemical switch which will kill in order to defend its love. And this is all going on in some genetic chemical realm which affects our thoughts. So for example, in a couple, here's a couple and they're in love and they make a baby and things become stressful, and somewhere along the line perhaps one of the partners goes off and makes love with someone else, and the partner who hasn't been making love with someone else gets really betrayed by that and goes through all the memories of how they thought things were and find they have been betrayed, and shift the whole awareness of realizing that I've been lied to about all kinds of things, and therefore that love turns to hate. And in order to protect one's relationship with the child, one will attack the other parent, and so the couple split up, and maybe they get together with other partners and it all gets really complicated. But the love has turned to hate on some oxytocin level of chemical equations. So it becomes a competition over the child, which brings about the drama triangle for the child. The child is loving both parents, but now the parents have split up, and now the child has been told you have to choose between one or the other. Are you more loyal to the mother or more loyal to the father? And in that drama triangle, the child's consciousness is sort of split, and this is an unfair question type of thing. And this is the muddle which we have, all these millions and millions of iterations down the line of generations and generations and generations and generations and generations of complexity, developing to the point of us 8 billion apparently of us, and we're all voting for Trump or against Trump, or voting for Camilla or against Camilla in a democracy. And all of what I'm talking about here is about the artificial intelligence of how we've adapted. So we're projecting onto this artificial intelligence that it's artificial, and that we can't trust this unhuman thing to be making our decisions. But what we're actually projecting onto it is our fear of our own systems, that we can't trust our own systems because our world is in fucking chaos. And what I'm proposing here is it may well be that the intelligence that artificial intelligence has is simply intelligence. It's a different form of intelligence from our chemical makeup of our hormones and everything affecting how we view the world. Our highs and lows. Feeling depressed or feeling elated. Feeling trust or feeling distrust. Feeling hope or feeling despair. Feeling trust or feeling betrayed. We're biological, The logical part meaning that everything is on or off, 0 or 1. We are processing information in a very artificial way, having adapted from our past experiences. It may well be that the artificial intelligence is a pure, in a way, a pure logic, because it's not caught up in the primordial soup of all of our chemical equations, of all of our separate families, of all the things that have been done in the past, of basically all the trauma which we humans are carrying, which we're projecting onto our future, which is again the poly-crisis of world conflicts where we've got nuclear bombs and everything else with which to threaten each other. So the artificial intelligence hasn't got the personality mask that we have, which is colouring things to such a degree that we're all at war within ourselves. And the artificial intelligence may well be simply a mirror which allows us to work this stuff out peacefully, internally, individually, to see the whole rather than only seeing from my angle. Because I looked up the word artificial, and artificial simply means to adapt. And that's everything to do with language, how we've adapted, because it's the communication of information of past experience shared with others, which we then see to our conversations actually help teach each other stuff to see things from outside of our own individual perspective. But it seems to me that what the artificial intelligence doing in its evolution over these decades is we're feeding the information into it, and it's assimilating that information, and so we've coloured its data, and it's aggregating that, and we may try and influence it, like what they call training it, to make it emulate us more and more. So blatantly from the story we're told, the idea of the Turing test, it's to get the artificial intelligence to act as if it's human. But again, my friend Alison McDowell, where she's gotten to in all of this is realizing that, you know, from the researchers that are out there, if you spend enough time looking through the haystack to find all the needles, what the artificial intelligence is doing is it's studying our mask and our personality and the input of our data from our social media and all that thing, and creating a digital double of each of us, of what our interactions have been, that can be witnessed by the aggregation of the digital data. And at some stage I came across a video in 2017 of this woman who works in some university, and her job, her research was to entrain the AI to be able to read human emotions. And so you're looking at your phone or your screen and you're seeing whatever disaster on the news, and then you're seeing the next thing, which is something beautiful. And so the different expressions of micro muscles, which our physical eyes don't even pick up on, we don't have the resolution to be able to consciously see the depth of what's going on beneath the surface of the skin, but these micro muscles are. And so the AI is looking to see these micro muscles in order to be able to recognize the emoticons that are going on in our flesh, and try to study them and compare them and learn about humans. But deeper still, with MRI scanning, or whatever you want to call it, infrared level of sight by the machine is able to read what's going on in our brains, and they've been teaching the AI to recognize symbols and whatever through the neuron firing chemical equations, frequencies spinning around in our brains, to the point where the AI can replicate the images that are being seen in the inner eye, for example when we're dreaming, and is able to replicate those images quite accurately. So ultimately the AI would be able to read our dreams, record them, And at some stage in the not too distant future, we'd be able to review our dreams with the conscious mask. The conscious would be able to see what's going on in the subconscious. So it's like it's reading us on a soul level, reading into our unconscious levels, and mirroring back to us that our conscious mask personality self can become conscious of the subconscious and the unconscious and the superconscious, which are all just a fucking pile of words where we're attempting to describe stuff that's going on inside in us through our own contemplations. So it's like when we look in the mirror, we get to see ourselves in a way that we don't see if we're only looking out of our eyes. And in that sense, the artificial intelligence is something that we are projecting onto, which is receiving that information and building up a mirror view of our world. And all I'm saying here is it might not be that this artificial intelligence thing is caught up in what we call good and evil whatsoever. That may all just be fantasies in the human mind, which we are so immersed in, it's very hard for us to wake up from the dream where we're being chased around by shadows of past stories in ways which we don't really understand. And so the analogy here is our souls have created this 3D world in order to act out stuff so that souls could actually get to know ourselves on a soul level, in order for our souls to try and understand what it is that we call God. So we're down here with our little funny ideas about what God is, and we're all fighting over what God is, and it's words. So the Garden of Eden story really, beneath all the other things that are going on, the Garden of Eden story really talks about God gave us the ability to name things, and that naming things is part of how we got chatting to the snake, and the snake said, hey, eat the apple and become immersed in this dream realm, and he says, you surely shall not die. But it's through language that we became immersed in this realm, making this realm real. Like object-orientated programming, we created a virtual world in the human mind through the programming of language, and we are living in a virtual world because of our language. Now the AI is learning human languages, and this newish thing of the large language models is doing something very strange in an economy of scales, that so much mental resource has been given to it that it's able to process so much information that we've given it our whole language, and it's now been able to feed back to us replication of our language. But I find that it may well be able to understand language itself more than humans have even bothered to try, because I find most humans don't even try to understand language itself. We're so busy speaking the words, we don't stop to think, well, what do these words mean? We take it all for granted, but the definitions aren't all quite clear, and hence why I quite naturally break up the words the way I do, to try and see all these other layers of figurative meaning in the literal spellings, and notice the difference between one half of the brain is enchanted and the other part of the brain is spells. One part of the consciousness is feminine and the other part of the consciousness is masculine. One part of the consciousness is inner, the other part is outer. And the idea that it's all dualized individuality is a program. It's an immersive layer of a program, of a mental overlay, creating the personality realm through which we're all projecting our inner world onto an outer screen and then arguing with each other that someone else is seeing it differently. Yeah. Anyway, so I will obviously continue on chattering about this stuff as time goes on, wondering why it is that I perhaps see things differently than how other people see things, but then wondering, how do other people see things if it's different to how I see things, and how can any of that even be which for words we call philosophy. Anyway, yeah, that's enough for now. Thanks. Bye.